I speak some in Self-Chain, Chain, and Pt1. Uh, I am from Colombia, Miss Person, Speelum, and Paula. And I have an email here if you have any questions for later. And you'd like more information or anything like that, I am a major nerd and I'm really, really happy to share resources with anyone. So if you find something that you're super interested in from the presentation, just let me know and I can send it to you or just like more resources about that topic. I can send you, like,
How come it keeps moving? Oh, I think it's following her. Yeah. Okay.
So I have an introduction of myself, but when I did this training over at the school, I only had about half a dozen people. So I'm going to go ahead and forgo this. So some of the key terms that we're going to go over are here, and they're a bit intense. So I want people to be prepared for them. And some of them are just pretty much, like as a private member, and they're very, very familiar and common, and you're good with that. So, Confederate tribes, all Indian reservations, call the Confederate tribes, Native American, American Indian, white privilege, historical tribes, intergenerational, and resilience. So we're going to go over each of these in depth and discuss them. And I think this is an interactive thing. It's not a lecture, just so you know. And the people that I do know in the room are going to get picked on. So if I'm like actually not doing it, then I'm going to, just also. So, for a lot of those coming into tribal communities and the breadth of Native America, basically. And so this is of all the tribal nations that existed pre-contact to the best of their ability. So from like all Central America, these are all the tribes that were affected. So and some of you can't see this very well, especially in back, but just kind of understand that there are so many different, and it's super important when you're working with the tribal community to understand them, because like some people they think of Native Americans as this like homogenous group where they're all kind of the same-ish, and that's not the case. We all have our own histories and stories. We all have our own distinct cultures, and so once we kind of see how many there are in the whole of North America, not even counting South America, because the world is always down too, then you kind of understand like, oh, okay, this is why we are, like talking about like Native people, and we're using these plurals and different things because there are so many different tribes. And also, please let me know if I'm speaking too quickly. I kind of do that sometimes, especially when I'm excited about a topic. And this is like my favorite stuff. So. All right, so according to the U.S. Census, there are approximately 6.79 million American Indian Alaska Native here in the United States. So there's a pretty good few. There's 74 as of the last count. Now, changes pretty regularly. So more tribes are added on, some taken on. There are 5,490 tribes, nations, Pueblos, Julias, communities, and in the United States. So approximately 220 in Alaska alone, just in Alaska. Um, the rest are in the 133 states. There are 200 languages and some 300 that are currently spoken today. And of those, there are only about 20 that are in the traditional way. And by 20, in the traditional way, I mean parents teaching their children in the home. So this is the language that they learn in their homes. And the number 20 is very, very small. The number nation is one of the strongest first language speaking communities for native languages. And then the next one is probably the Cherokee. which is surprising, but they have one of the highest numbers of enrollment because they have open enrollment for all of those people who can prove descendancy. So, sorry about that. It's really warm and it's cool and warm, and it all just comes with making it kind of human. Sorry. Um, all right, so this is one of my favorite topics, and it's language. So I can wax poetic for a while, but I'll try to be brief on this because last time I got carried away. Um, these are the different languages that are spoken here in North and Central America. So up here in the Pacific Northwest, where we're focusing on, and the languages here are the Spanish languages, blue here, and then you have Plateau languages here, the pinkish color, and then a little bit of this little guy over here. But most of the languages are English languages that are here, and they're mutually intelligible, which means that despite the fact that they're different, most of the time you understand something. So for and self-chain and in chain, they sound kind of similar in their names, right? The word for thank you in self-chain is lima, and the word in Moses Columbia or in self-chain is lamla. So they're very similar. And one of the key characteristics that unifies the Salish language family is what's called the Mosin link. And this is something that means that, like, the word for the number four, which is moose or mush, is very similar in every single Salish language. All the way to the coast, all the way up into Canada, and down here, it's all super duper similar. And that's one of the things that unifies all the Salish languages. In addition to something called reduplication, which is a really fun facet of the language and is unique to Salish languages. Other languages all across the United States and Canada and Central America and even the globe, they don't have reduplication in the same way that Salish does. So for me, it was a really, really fun character. So apparently I don't know until I was looking at this. Oh yeah, that's all of it. But this is going to be showing you the traditional kind of territories of this plateau area. So not just Washington, but Idaho, Montana, and Oregon, and a little bit of California. But it shows you, like New Mexico, the middle of Columbia River Salish, Blues, Spokane, Northville, Okanagan, Mexico, all of these things. It shows you where they're or what the traditional territories were. Now, these don't always take into consideration joint use areas and areas that were used, like for different gathering purposes. So all the tribes have these different territories, but different times of year they would use different areas, and some of them would overlap with other tribes, which is dependent, right? So if it was a certain time of year, everyone would go to the mountains to get berries. Some of those mountains were the same mountains, different time of year, y'all went to those mountains. Or where the salmon gather and everything, like Temple Falls, everyone's going to get falls. All these tribes are going to get falls. There, okay. That's amazing. Maybe that's amazing. I don't know what it is. So I'm going to go over a brief history, and I know that there are a lot of tribe members here present today. So some of y'all know this, and that's okay. And some of you might have been working here for a while and be familiar with it. So please let me know if you want more information. And if this is all kind of new for you, then like let's go. So the organization was created April 9th, 1832 by executive order from President Grant. So prior to that, many of the tribes that were established were created by a treaty. And it was, like the United States government meeting with the tribes and saying, what are the lands that you want, and try to accommodate that. What are, like the different rights that you'd like? We'll try to accommodate that. At this point, the federal government was like, nope, we're done. We don't care anymore. We're tired of this. We're just done with the Indian business, specifically phrased it. So the president was just creating executive order tribes. Now, here on the Caldwell Indian Reservation, they created the executive order tribe for the Caldwell Confederated Tribes, and it was a different confederation. So there were like Spokanes and Coeur d'Alenes and Kalispell included in the original confederation, and like the Nez Perce and Moses, those weren't even part of it yet. But things changed, and they got their own reservations, and those people who had reservations lost their reservations, and they became a part of what the current confederation is. So the Confederation tribes located in central Washington, the Mississippi River, our traditional territory, we call the tribes that across eastern Washington and into portions of British Columbia, Oregon, and Idaho, covering approximately 39 million acres. So today, the reservation is 1.1 million acres and includes the 12 tribes, which are divided into 4 language groups. So a lot of people only recognize 3 language groups on the reservation, but there are actually 4. And the language program is still kind of working on getting the 4th language recognized. So it's a little bit tricky for the people who are Palouse who want to be able to practice their language and learn more about it and those different things. So it sucks. But it's still a Sahapian language, so it's related to Nez Perce. So they're similar, but they're not actually like mutually intelligible. So they're distinct enough that if one person was speaking to another, you couldn't understand. Unlike the Moses Columbia and Cabo, which so the reservation is approximately 0.1 acres. Prior to that, it was twice the original size and included territories that extended up to the Canadian border. But those northern territories were completely lost. There are some allotments that still exist in the north half, but the reservation was completely cut from. Here is the traditional territories as well as can be estimated. So it's not 100% accurate, but it's a really, really good approximation of the traditional territories of each of the 12 tribes that compose the Caldwell Confederated Tribes today. So, yeah, just what the largest territory here appears to be the Mountain Lakes, and then the Colville, the Semqual, the Smeal, and yeah, these are the only tribes that inhabited the land. So right here you can see the bound of the reservation as it is today. So all of these other tribes were removed from their traditional territories and put on here. And so that's one of the reasons why there's some tension between different tribes and stuff, is because this is not their original land. And for those tribes that were originally here that inhabited this land, and crushing all of, like space and all this. So, like you have some people with, some extra activity with that. It's funny because my parents, my mom is Nez Perce, and she's probably one of the youngest person I know, and my dad is Nez Perce, and my dad terrible thing with the book all the time. About Nez Perce all the time, even though he ended up marrying a Nez Perce and having children with the Nez Perce woman, but the Templars are really salty about the fact that the Nez Perce came and took a lot of land and resources. Yeah. So is the government did that on purpose, putting the tribes together in one call? It was a calculated move indeed. A lot of the tribes that were put together had like unhealthy relations, and they put everyone together in hopes that they would kill one another off and then we would have less people feel. So it was a calculated move. A lot of confederations were Shoshone and Baptists were mortal enemies, and they were put on the same reservation, and it was hoped that they would kill one another, and then they wouldn't have to worry. But they became friends and intermarried, and now you got programs all over the place. So it's very similar to here in that you have several misperceived people. Um, so It's still a thing. I know, I remember when the murals were done in the community center, and they included Chief Joseph on the outside, some people were upset about it. So, I think my mom talked to me about it, and I didn't really understand it at first, because I was still pretty young. I went to school and everything and learned about it, I was like, oh, I understand, I see how this works now. So, these are the 12 groups that compose the public federated tribes. There's Chelan, Okanagan, Colville, Metcalfe, Moose, Lake, Nispelon, Senecal, Whispers, Old Columbia, and Seattle. And there is a public Indian reservation as it is today, so that you can kind of see all of the different governments and each of the different districts and where they are. Here's a Chelan, where here. I actually have it. More stuff in the picture, just kind of go back to its first and so four different language groups. The Cabo Okanagan language is broken into Western Okanagan with Northern and Eastern Lake with Lake Cabo and then so North Columbia or Columbian as it's called or in Virginia is only speaking down and the NCAA and then first and are the groupings that dominate the Southern Plateau and include the first and uh, and I know there are different initiatives across the reservation to try to push for language revitalization in all of the different language groups that come into happen. So they're trying to have different language initiatives so that each of the languages are taught in each of the districts, or trying to figure out whether they want to have the languages for traditional territories spoken in each of the different districts. So because there are like different groups that have settled in different areas, so like here in Chilin, I get to be an outsider because there are not a lot of Nespers and stuff wells here. But there are lots of Lakes tribe people and stuff, they want to have only in Saskatchewan. And then over in this field, because that's where this first one put, and then Columbia, and then also they have speakers of in Saskatchewan, they want to have more of the language spoken there. And, like distributed as such across the reservation. But the last time we talked to anyone in council, what we're doing with those different language initiatives. If you go into policy, good at education policy, like the tutorial and those sort of things that go past the state level to try to encourage cultural and linguistic survival and everything. But today, each of the districts have some language support, and like in the Nesbitt area, most of the languages that are spoken in only in Saskatchewan and in Saskatchewan, and here it is only in Saskatchewan right now. So. Okay, so now we're gonna get into looks because despite the fact that I'm very enthusiastic about language, I'm one of the only ones, which is surprising and super sad and terrible at the same time. A lot of people are not familiar with the language, they have not spoken the language has not been a part of their home life and everything like that for a very long time. So some of you who know me know that my name, Simhikin, means female grizzly bear. But some of you may think it's a really weird name. Maybe, I don't know. But my mom and my dad gave each of us children that they had together Salish names because they were like, hey, we want to bring back the culture and the language and all these different things. And so they were really big on that after they got on board and stuff. And so, like me, my name is Samika, you know who's a my brother's from East, some of you may know him as well. His name means black bear. And then my younger sister, her name is Ukimaskakis, which means little bear. And, like it was very big for my parents to be like, we're gonna have the language spoken in our home as much as possible. We wanna have the cultural teachings in this home as much as possible because we lost so much. I mean, both of my parents went to boarding school. My mom actually had to go all the way to Tulaco in Oklahoma. So, like she was removed like over 1,000 miles, not just to the mission school over in Omaha, but way, way, way down there. So Native peoples lost their languages and cultures via calculated government maneuvers and assimilation via policies, land law, and mission and boarding schools. Um, Multiple schools established across the country with the express purpose of educating Native peoples. This was evident in the Humble Indian Reservation, which established at St. Mary's Mission, which was an Indian school located at it was established in the winter of 1985 and to 86 at King Rouge, a French Jesuit. So a lot of people have family that went to the mission school. Today it's called Pastor Sherman and it's bright and shiny, and it was actually just accredited and considered like an outstanding institution. So they're working really hard on changing that history and revitalizing language and culture today because of this really terrible history. Because there was so much trauma associated with that institution prior to, like its rebranding and stuff in the 70s. So historical, anyone familiar with the term historical trauma? I see a few hands. Yeah, it's something that, like people are starting to get more into, talking about a little bit more. Um, so the forced assimilation of Native children left a lot of mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical trauma in its wake. It is difficult confronting the fact that Native people's ancestors lived through this trauma, but to confront the fact that grandparents, parents, even some of our older siblings endured it is unthinkable. When you imagine this means in this impact, it doesn't quite touch us, but when it is something that our loved ones have lived through, it is something else entirely. It becomes more real. We can see it. We can see how the trauma of those experiences have shaped us and how it's shaped us all for the better and the worse. So, how many people have family that were in the mission school or right? I remember doing interviews here in Chilim with the elders and talking about their experiences in the mission boarding schools and how, like that shaped them for the better because they learned a lot of useful skills for survival and different things like that, but they also lost a lot of their culture and language through those institutions as well. A lot of research is done and it historicizes those experiences and puts them in the very, very distant past. Like this happened in the black and white 1800s days, and it doesn't touch people today as much, but that is not true. Like I have here, both of my parents went to boarding schools and mission schools. Both of them did. And even some of my older siblings did. So I don't know if any of you know, like my sister Billy Joe and Avery and them, like they went to the mission school as well. So it's not something that was like 100 million years ago. It was something that happened where like even my older siblings went to those schools. And it impacted my nieces and nephews because of, like the trauma that they endured. So I think that it's really important to bring those experiences forward more so that people understand why we can't just get over it, right? Why those things are still impacting us today as Native peoples. Because, like it's not hundreds of years ago. It's impacting us because it impacted our parents. It's impacting us because it impacted our siblings. You know, um, when we have like experiences like that in our families, we create unofficial policies where families try to protect one another by not sharing language and culture, right? So you have people who are like, oh, you don't want to do this, you don't want to speak the language because when I went to school just a few years before you, I got beat for doing this. So I'm not going to share it with you so that you don't have to go through that as well. And that's something that I heard over and over and over. The language left families and it left households because of those experiences from older siblings going to the younger ones, where they were just like, no, we don't want this. And I remember it got to the point where like she would say that the kids would get kicked out of the house when elders came over to speak the language because they didn't want the kids to learn the language because they were trying to protect them, which seems like really weird because right now we're like, oh, language is so important. But at the time, it was something scary. It was something bad. It was something that you were punished for. It was something that, like you didn't try to share. And so I remember my mom said she'd hid under the table because they had a tablecloth and she would try to listen to the conversations. And when she was little, the language was still in her home. But then when she left and she went to, like the mission school and the boarding schools and stuff, she lost that connection to her language and her culture. So, and that's something that happened with a lot of different families was, like that effort to protect the younger generations and then losing that connection. So, that sort of system in place in other family communities as well. Not just here, but like in Mesquite and my Keller as well. So, um, the Federal Indian Day and Boarding Schools. In 1819, Congress passed the Indian Civilization Act for the purpose of providing against early decline and extinction of the Indian tribes. To instruct them in the mode of agriculture suited to their situations and for teaching their children reading, writing, and arithmetic. In the 1860s, 48 federal day schools were created near reservations with the goal to civilize Indian children and parents. The belief was and there was a related place on ladder civilization with white and then through lower down civilization. The residential boarding school started shortly after Captain Pratt established the Carlisle Indian School in 1879. He believed that Indian children could be civilized. And here we have civilization including vocational training, academics, separation from family and culture, and training European graduates. So, does anyone here have family that was sent to Carlisle? Mm. My uncles had great grandparents were sent to Carlisle. So like great grandfather and his siblings all had to go to Carlisle, way over yonder in Pennsylvania. And I think that my great grandpa Hiram was actually kicked out of the school because it was a bit too um, intense for them. But he actually ended up becoming one of the first council members for the Colorado. So, because of the kind of leaders you want, the ones that are not afraid to get stuff going.
Smart.
Yeah.
As you share in this bullet point about the goal to civilize and the belief in the hierarchy, it gets me to thinking about, and I don't know if you can speak a little more to it, because I connect that with what you shared earlier about this isn't, this, these traumas weren't perpetrated 100 million years ago, that they are still happening. So it seems to me, if I connect that with that piece there, it would be pretty important for me as a provider to really think about that stuff and the subtle ways that it affects the care I provide somebody or the work I'm doing with somebody. Because often I think about, sometimes I want to give advice and I shift from a working with to a talking to or at. And what kind of impact can that have for somebody who still has those, has that experience that, oh, there's this hierarchy and here you are talking to me? What kind of impacts does that have?
Okay, so did everyone hear? Yes? All right, so how many people have experienced that where they're being talked at instead of, conversation or dialogue about, like, yeah, care and different things like that? Yeah, it's pretty common. Shift at some point during the interactions, and all of a sudden it becomes, like, it's not the same, they're anymore. And I remember it was my dad was talking about um, these sort of experiences create these unhealthy images and interaction with like the healthcare system and things where there's a lot of distrust because in my dad's day, my dad was thousands of years old. Some of you know him. Um, He was born in the 30s. He was born in the 30s, so he was literally born before the Depression and World War II and all that stuff. And so he was alive during the time when Native communities were being tested on, where they were given things that, like caused health problems and even death. And my mom was alive during the time when there was forced sterilization of Native women. And I mean, even, like members of my family were forcibly sterilized against their will. So you have this, like sense that other people know better than you do about, like your body and your health and these different aspects of your life. And they come to you and they start talking to you, and it becomes talking at instead of a dialogue. And all of a sudden you kind of tune out because you're just like, this isn't something that, like I have any input on. You're just telling me what to do, just like everyone else does, because you think you know better. You think you know me, you know my body, you know all these different things more than I do. And you don't respect, like the same different like cultural beliefs and things that have, been established in my community. So, like in 2017, the Cultural Tribe started working on an Empire, I think it was Empire Health, where they were starting to try to incorporate traditional practices and cultural beliefs and medicines into the healthcare system. And so they were trying to give it as much value as Western medicine. And so if someone said, I would like to take this route instead of, like the statins or something like that, I want to take this traditional tea that, like my elder told me would help with my body regulation instead. And they were just like, you get laughed at, right? Because those sort of things are, like held to the same standard. Because Western medicine thinks that it is superior to, like the traditional beliefs in the area. Despite the fact that a lot of the plant medicines have the same core ingredients. So if I drink willow tea, it's the same as taking aspirin essentially because it both has that gas, which is the active ingredient that helps with pain relief and different things like that, right? And there are different medicines that have, like those medicinal properties, and people are like, oh, that's nothing. But in reality, it has a lot of the same core, like base ingredients and things. And so it does the purpose that you want it to. But, like people disregard it, and then later in the history says, oh my gosh, we discovered this thing, and Native people have years of, so, like back and forth with, like these two diametrically opposed opinions and beliefs, like and you're like, I want to try, like these different alternative routes and different things. And then you have, like that like power dynamic where Western people and thoughts have this sense of superiority. And like, oh, it's objective science. How many people are familiar with that from school, right? Like objectivity as opposed to subjectivity, right? Where, like subjectivity is where, like you influence the answer somehow, or you influence it because of your beliefs and different things like that. Whereas objectivity is the idea that you can exist in this scientific world without having any influence on it with your beliefs and how you're raised and any of that sort of stuff. Which would be nice, but is not the case because there is an inherent sense of superiority that a lot of Western European folks carry into that field. The belief that science is superior because it's different, it's established differently, they have more rigorous testing and different things like that. Whereas, oh, what did you do? You followed, like these different animals and things around and you learned from them what is poison and what is not. And you learn what helps your body and what doesn't through a different process. So it makes it completely different, but it's subjective as opposed to objective, and so it is less rigorous and it's not as awful. So, but so when we're having interactions, we have to keep in mind those different dynamics, right, within these communities, where there is that sense of distrust, where is that sense of, like, hey, I remember when these things happened. And I mean, like for me, it's like my dad talking about all of the different times where, like they would use a guinea pig for all these different things because they were. It was the 30s, it was the 40s, it was the 50s. All those things were still totally okay. There were not the standards that there are today where, like we're supposed to test on people and do all these crazy things. So, but is that like kind of where you were going?
Yes, it does. So it seems to me it's important for us to be mindful of that and just kind of be aware of it along the way, because it seems to me as some of it is, not with malice intent, not intentional, not consciously, but like you were just sharing, oftentimes going through how many years of school, just myself and what I'm exposed to in the school I went to, I get indoctrinated into that. And then it becomes my belief that, yeah, it is the top of the chain when in fact it isn't. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Alright. But it paints a very clear picture too. I remember my mom talking about, and see, like, I pull from personal experience because I feel like it informs, like how I understand things, which it does. But it also kind of helps other people understand because, like, these are lived experiences, so nothing that comes from a book or anything like that, which I love, by the way. But, I remember my mom talking about when she went to boarding school and she had to have a haircut. And they used these like big giant metal pumps with chemical like pesticides and they sprayed all of the kids with them. And like because they were inherently dirty, right? There was the belief that like native children were dirty and they had all of these awful, like fleas and stuff all over them and stuff and like that they had to have their hair cut because it wasn't like a clean hair or anything. And so she was just like, it was a really intense experience for her and a lot of her siblings that went through the same process. So she had a similar transformation where she had long hair and it was cut, and like she had to change her clothing and different things. But I mean, it wasn't as dramatic as shifted clothing because she wasn't wearing buckskin as much as dresses made out of flower tack because they were very pink and floral. So from 1880 to 1902, there were 25 observation. There were 20 to 30,000 Native American children that attended these schools. And in 1900, there were 460 boarding and day schools near the reservation, owned by religious organizations with government support. Over 100,000 Native Americans were forced to attend Christian schools where tribal languages and cultures were discouraged. So this here image is Tom Tornino, a Carlisle student, before and after spending time. So in these institutions, you have people with the best of intentions, theoretically. You have really folks that want to help the down native people who are being, like forcibly killed by the military, things, and they want to save them from that fate. And so you have what develops is called a white savior complex. And it's, like the idea that you can save them, and, like a white person, and that it is your job to. This is something that a lot of people come into Native communities believing is that it is their role and, like what they can do. And I know that it's complicated and that it's a trope that you see in movies and stuff. You have like Dances with Wolves and Kevin Costner, and like he has to go in and save the Indians. Then you have even the movie Wind River, right, where the white officer comes in and saves the day because the natives can't help themselves, and it's their role to save the native people because like they're so dysfunctional that they can't save themselves. So it's something that comes up a lot in Native communities where people come in and feel like it's their responsibility to save Native peoples. And this is also deeply, deeply entrenched in religious beliefs and values. Not to say that they're bad at all by any stretch of the imagination, just that, like they did a lot of harm because they put themselves helping, and they didn't talk to them. There was no dialogue about, like, hey, do you need this? How can we make this useful or beneficial to you? It was just like, I'm going to do this for you because I know what's best for you, right? It's, like the belief that, like, I'm a superior thinking being, of Western descent, know what's best and can help you better than you can help yourself because you're ignorant and you don't know better and you're uneducated and all these different things. All of these different ideas that place hierarchy to people and communities. So the impacts of historical trauma. Essential to etiological explanations for substance abuse disparities in indigenous communities worldwide is that the widespread cumulative historical traumas that have emerged as a result of colonization are the most deeply rooted social determinants of contemporary health. Historical trauma has been defined in following terms as the cumulative emotional and psychological wounding over the lifespan and across generations emanating from massive group experiences. This is a quote from someone who's experienced it. I feel like I'm carrying a weight around that I've inherited. I have this theory that everything comes from genetically because it's there and I never knew where it came from. I feel like I have a responsibility to undo the pain, separate myself from the past, the history, and the trauma. So it has been established through Western medicine and objective that this is true. Native peoples have had this belief for a long time. And it was something that, like, okay, sure, brushed off. But now they've been doing research, and it's called epigenetics. And they have discovered that this trauma does indeed get carried on through the gene. And so it's something that is real, it's tangible. They've studied it with mice in hand. So that means it's real, real. But it's something that, like, it's been proven by Western science, and so it's more legit than the beliefs that Native peoples carried, that they were carrying this load of trauma from their parents and their grandparents and past generations. So, sorry, I have to catch my breath because my lungs are tiny.
And we know, that these impacts, they're not in a silo. They're not like separated from as only psychological or emotional harms. It's also connected in their physical implications and spiritual implications. So it's all connected to, I guess, for a caution more for myself too, again, is that you can't just look at it and say, well, there might be something there in the emotional, psychological. You also got to remember it's all connected.
So any of my like physical healthy type peoples who understand, the physical manifestations of trauma can speak to this a little bit more. And that was beautifully phrased, I'm sure, and makes perfect sense because I speak English very, very well. But and I understand, like the physical manifestations of trauma that you see day to day. Oh, back.
Yeah, physical trauma, trauma that you start with, you're born with, that you're raised with, that's with you daily, that you never really get that relief from. It causes increased blood pressure, it can lead to strokes, it can lead to cardiovascular issues, it can lead to diabetes, it can lead to obesity, it can lead to mental health issues. And I mean, that's with that, I'm nervous, I'm sitting down, yes.
Right, so you have a lot of people have this belief that like this is like a mental health issue and you silo it as such without letting it touch any of these other areas of a person's life. What it does, it impacts all of these different areas, and you have people with greater chances for diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular health issues, and all these different things, and it's all because of this trauma. They're not separate, they're all connected. And a lot of people for a long time thought they were and still operate under the assumption that they are. But within, like these different communities, we have to understand, like they are connected. It's connected to living on a reservation. It's connected to living in a food desert. It's connected to using food as a coping mechanism for these mental health issues, right? But I eat mashed potatoes when I'm sad, but when I'm feeling things, and those are the healthiest ways to process emotion. But those are the things that I've adapted. And like those eating habits can and they can have like long-term detrimental effects. I know my mom, thank you, she stopped drinking over 30 years ago, I think. And when she did, she started drinking Pepsi. And then she drank a lot of Pepsi. And then she became diabetic. And then she had all these health issues because she was drinking Pepsi like it was nobody's business, but it was what she used to get past the alcohol. And, like that is something that you see a lot of, where even one of my cousins, I remember, he would have a case of Pepsi and he would open like one, and it was just like that was what he used to get past drinking alcohol, but he just substituted addiction for another. And it's a long process before he was able to like determine like, oh, this Pepsi is actually really detrimental to my health also, and maybe I need a different kind of coping mechanism. Maybe I need to figure out how to process this addiction and to, like work through it in a different way. But for a lot of people, they never have that moment, right? They just go from one addiction to another. Or, like they have co-occurring sort of situations where like I'm gonna use these drugs and alcohol and food and all these different things to deal with these traumas because they're heavy and they're intense and they're intergenerational and they're like stacked one on top of another. People think like, oh, this historical trauma, yes, it happened in the past. They're not considering the traumas that we experience day to day as Native people, right? The traumas of like going and not being taken care of at the restaurant because of the color of your skin, or going to a store and being asked to wait at the door with your purchases instead of wandering around like the rest of the people that you're with because you're not trustworthy because of the color of your skin.
I gotta interject this. The two situations that she's talking about right now, they happen, and I was there for them. They feel this is people who are here, so people who are here, you're authorized. It's not seen as much. Yes, it is. Yeah. I know what's on Terry. I know I did. You see it, but I know you see it. You live with your parents. Historically, people in this group who have not.
Yeah, it's really important to, like become aware of these things because you have folks that come in with different perspectives. And I mean, you have urban Indians that have different lived experiences versus res Indians. I remember when I went to grad school, I was the only person who grew up on a reservation because everyone else in my program came from urban areas. They came from New York, they came from Minneapolis, they came from San Francisco, all these different places. And they didn't have the same experiences that I did. And some of those experiences that I had served to reinforce my culture and my beliefs and my practices. And some of them, were much more intense than those experienced by my counterparts. And those can be different based on parents as well. I mean, my grandma, she was part of the relocation program. Right? So how many of you are familiar with relocation, Indian Relocation Act? Yep. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Just where they moved from their homelands to their reservations, like they were given allotments in the vicinity.
No, like, it's when, that was a different kind of relocation. That was, the first relocation, but I mean the one that took place in like the fifties. No? Anyone? So, and in later generations, past the reservation relocation, where people were literally like policed to keep reservations, and they were put on there, and it was like a really intense, horrible experience. Um, and they were shot and killed if they left the reservations to go like hunting or anything like that, which made them dependent on the commodity food system. It was a whole thing. More in the diabetes and health issues. But like my grandma, Stella, she she was relocated from the Colville Indian Reservation to Oakland, California, so that she could go to school. And it was supposed to be an opportunity situation, but a lot of people were given almost no choice or monetary, like inducements and different things. So she went to Oakland to become a nurse, and she went there. She was told that she would be taken care of. She'd have housing. She'd have all the support. She'd have financial aid for school. Those things did not materialize. And on top of that, in California at the time, and I'm sure it was elsewhere as well, but California has like a whole kind of where like Indians are like seen as lower than animals in some cases. Like there is a clear, and it has been explained to my family at different junctures, where like they're below dogs and horses, because horses and dogs are useful, Indians are not. But she went to school in California, and the only way that she could be treated like a person was if she told people that she was Mexican or Hispanic. And so she had a whole different identity where she would go to places and she was Estrella instead of Stella, so that people wouldn't literally kick her out of the store or kick her out of wherever she was trying because she was not treated equal. And because of this mistreatment, she ended up joining the American Indian movement, and occupying out and doing all kinds of stuff like that. She was just like, I don't want to be treated like that anymore. But those are the things, like that people experience. Those are the traumas that we carry. Those stories that are passed on from one generation to the next are, those experiences that inform us and our beliefs and our understanding of the world around us. But like they're all different. Those urban experiences are different from the reservation experiences. Sometimes the reservation experiences can be a bit more intense even, because we have like a lot of, like, I don't even know how to say this, but um, because of how we're so, like isolated and everything, that, like it makes it the dynamics different and everything. And in addition to that, you have, like the politics of appearance, right? Where you're judged based on your like skin color and your hair color and all these different things. I remember when I was growing up, I had like all this fluffy craziness. And in the summer and it's humid days, if it's getting kind of rainy, I have hold on, oops, going and some issues and some feelings about my hair. And I'm the lightest person in my family out of all of my siblings. And I have crazy hair, which my other siblings have like coal black hair. And I mean, Scabisi has black hair, but it's getting gray. And it's real wavy, but he usually keeps it short so that you can't tell. Um, but like he does that because of the judgment and the different things, right? We change our appearance to try to be more accepted in all these different things because of the judgment, not just from outside, but and that's called internal pollination, right? Anyone familiar with that one? Yeah,
Is it similar or the same to lateral aggression?
it is. Do you want to say anything? No, you're good. Right. So it's that belief that like certain characteristics or appearance things are favorable or unfavorable, and then we piece one another about those things, as opposed to having anyone on the outside say anything we're doing it to ourselves and amongst ourselves, right? So, like kids making fun of other kids because of the color of their skin or their hair or anything like that. We're doing it to ourselves now. And they don't have to do it. Oh, non-native people don't have to do it anymore. They don't have to say, like, oh, these characteristics are unfavorable. We do it ourselves. And it's really dysfunctional and unpleasant. And we're having discussions about, like how, you know, we're gonna move forward in the future because of these different things. And blood quantum was created literally so that we would go to the wayside and we would read out as it were, which is ugly to think of and like turn people and that word considered stock and all these different things, but it's a reality that we live with, right? Blood quantum, we have to look at it tells us how much Indian you are. And those are all things that were established so that we would finally go away. The Indian problem would be solved. And that's all part of the topic. So,
Still happening today, right? I mean, it's not like that, not old, it's not 100 years old or right now, today. I mean, I believe tonight that it actually would give me.
yeah,
These are things.
yeah, I mean, in the 30s, way back when, my dad's blood quantum was determined by all Indian blood. Didn't matter the tribe, it was all Indian blood. Then later they said, no, it's got to be called blood only. And so then we have other blood as like a thing. And now we're talking about like, does the other blood count towards it? Or because at the federal level, you just have to prove 1/4 Native American ancestry. It doesn't, you just have to prove you're one. And once you're less than, then you are no longer an Indian. You are no longer Native. You don't have protections or anything, services. Um, it's all gone. And getting to a day and age where you have, like people from different tribes intermarrying and stuff, and people are not enrollable anymore. We have genetic testing and stuff, showing descendancy and all that stuff, and it's making it more and more complicated. Just having these discussions and stuff, and it all goes back to this idea of, like trauma and intergenerational. It carries through. So more because there's more. There's loads and loads of that. Some of the effects of negative experiences can individual behaviors and states. I.e., creation or equal survival may produce indirect effects on subsequent generations by way of unlearned caretaking strategies, caretaker mental health problems, broken kinship networks, and preoccupation with one's own need to heal. Many health problems are directly connected to their colonized status and to associated forms of environmental, institutional, and interpersonal discrimination. An emphasis emphasizes traditional cultural buffers, including positive indigenous identity and institutional health behaviors. An important question is whether we are to interpret these patterns as a form of resilience or as evidence that Euro-North American acculturation have been successful. So we look at the attempts to assimilate and we look at the efforts that have been mounted to try to prevent that assimilation and trying to regain some of that traction that we lost with like culture and language revitalization that's taking place in a lot of communities. I mean, like we have like the canoe journeys and stuff going on, and those are so deeply connected to, like language. And we have, like language schools and stuff, and more than just like language classes, but culture and all these different facets. And creation of the system memorial. So we have like more push towards, like cultural education, historical, accurate historical education in the schools and stuff. Where, like I remember when I was in school, we had like a little section on Pacific West, and um, they talked about the area a little bit, but it wasn't like as in depth. But now they're trying to focus on the specific history of the tribes associated with different land bases and stuff, so that they can those real conversations and say like, hey, this is your history, not just, Western history or anything, but this is specifically history, the people's history. And so it's like more deeply connected to you as a Native person. So, but these health problems, right? They are all connected to that. And we have these resiliency factors that help with that load. And so when we think about resilience, we think about like the ability to bounce back, right? And I have a slide on this, so I'm not gonna go super duper in depth to it, but like there are ways to protect yourself from, like these traumas and the negative impacts of them. And that has to do with supporting traditional Native culture and identity. A lot of people, they have the school briefly, and like kids know like that they're Native, but they don't know anything about their history or their identity. They don't even know what they are. They just know that like they're Native, and so I had them like go home and talk to their family, and then come back and they're like, okay, my grandma said that, like, these are my tribes, and that these are my grandparents, and these are my parents, and all these things. And so they got to dig into who they were a little bit more, and they were super excited to present it, it was super adorable. But it was something where they got to learn more about themselves, and they were proud of their identity. And this is something that they didn't know before. And it made me sad that they didn't know anything about who they were before. It's part of that, like where we have generations of people who are like, I don't know. I mean, when I worked at the treatment center, we had a lot of folks who were like, I don't know. And so we did the same thing. We had them reach out to us and stuff and say like, okay, who are you? What is your, like tribes and everything like that. And then they learned about it and they were just like, I didn't know this. Some of them found out, like stuff they never knew before. They're like, these are my great grandparents. I never knew who they were. I never met them or anything. They were so in, their addiction and stuff that they didn't have those connections. They completely lost them. Or, like it was just never a part of their home because of the trauma, right? And so once they had established this connection, it became something that they were proud of, part of their identity. And who they were as people was just like, hey, I'm not just like a Caldwell person, and like I'm like I have feelings about people, I identify with Caldwell anyway. Because I'm like, that's that dude that, like set up the fort and everything and like set up the stairs and stuff. Not a great association, right? So I'm working on like using, like those traditional names and things associated with our tribes so that, like you have more real connection. And so, like when I introduce myself, I always say all of my tribes. I'm just, I'm enrolled Colville, or, like I'm enrolled in the Colville Confederated Tribes or the, Confederation or something. But it's very important for me to say all of those because those are the things that make me who I am. Those tribes, those people are who made me here today who I am. Like my mom is the person, she's very, very proud of that. And it's important to me that that is made clear, like that this is a part of my identity. My dad is Sanfal, and that's really important to him, that's part. And then like understanding where I get my Moses Columbia and the family stories of, like after my first great grandparents being one of the chief Moses' wives. I'm super proud of that. But it's part of my family history and it's a story that I know that connects to that part of my identity. It's not just a label on my tribal ID or anything. It's, like a story. It's a connection to that part of who I am. And all of these different things make me who I am. I'm like very, very keen to like let people know and to introduce them and say like, hey, these are the tribes that make me who I am. And I always include the Ogo Lakota because my great grandma that raised my dad, she was Lakota. And, like that is a big part of who my dad is. He still speaks some Lakota. And he doesn't know, he mixes it with Nez Perce and all these other languages because he's just like, I remember learning this word and this other, and he is 85 and he gets everything twisted up. But, it's all really, really important to him. So I'm like, he was raised this way by his grandmother. And so it's important for me to make sure that other people understand it's part of my um, I am gonna call a short break, and let people stretch out and move around, and do the vital business and all that stuff.
I like colors of cracking.
Oh, yeah.
Like that one right there. Want to just go back?
How do you pause this?